Hi. Today I'm going to delve into Tudor history and begin exploring the psychological impact of Henry VIII on his daughters Mary I and Elizabeth I. How did their complex relationships with their father and his treatment of them shape their lives and reigns? Thank you so much to Pamela for asking, how do you think Henry VIII's daughters were impacted psychologically by his treatment of them? Let's embark on this historical journey to the 16th century, and today I'm looking at Mary I. Henry VIII's eldest daughter was born in February 1516 and was his daughter by Catherine of Aragon. She was the result of Catherine's fifth and penultimate pregnancy and was their only surviving child of 6 pregnancies. She may not have been the Prince of Wales Henry wanted, but for a long time she was the apple of the king's eye, his pearl in the world. She was pampered, she was shown off to visiting dignitaries, and she received an excellent education. It is clear that her parents adored her and that she had a happy and privileged childhood. And the king even recognised her as his heir as part of a treaty with France when she was just 2, and she became betrothed to the infant Dauphin of France. And in 1525, a household was established for her in the Welsh marches at Ludlow. She was to lead a council there, as her late uncle Arthur Tudor had, and she was Princess of Wales in all but name. As a daughter, she was a political pawn, her future marriage prospects resting on the diplomatic agreements hammered out by her father and his government. But she seemed to relish showing off to ambassadors and charming them with her musical skills and behaviour. But then along came Anne Boleyn. In 1527, Henry VIII agreed the Treaty of Westminster, its terms meaning that Mary would marry either King Francis I of France or his second son, the Duke of Orleans. To celebrate this alliance, a masque and banquet were organised, in which Mary played a leading part. At this celebration, her father chose to dance with one of the Queen's maids of honour, Anne Boleyn. Mary was probably unaware at this time that her father had decided to set aside her mother and that he'd proposed to Anne and that she had accepted. All her father needed was an annulment from the Pope. Unfortunately for Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, the Pope didn't want to play ball. Catherine of Aragon's nephew was Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, and the recent sack of Rome had put the Pope firmly in his pocket. The Pope could not afford to upset the Emperor. And Catherine herself was defending her marriage and opposing the annulment. There was no way she was accepting that her marriage was unlawful and her daughter illegitimate. She was going to fight for her rights and those of her daughter. But where does Mary come in all of this? Well, as historian Melita Thomas notes, the lesson that Mary learnt from both her parents was to act in accordance with her conscience, no matter how unpleasant was her duty. She couldn't please both of them, so she had to go where her conscience led her. When her mother was finally banished from court in 1531 and separated from her daughter, Mary took her mother's side. However, she was careful not to attack her father. Instead, she blamed Anne Boleyn, seeing her as some kind of Jezebel who had led her father astray. She couldn't quite bring herself to be against her father. In 1533, Henry VIII married a pregnant Anne Boleyn and had his marriage to Catherine annulled. Nothing changed for Mary until Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, in September 1533, instead of the expected prince. Mary would have expected to be no longer heir to the throne had a prince been born, but she didn't expect to be demoted in favour of a younger half-sister. But Mary was demoted and in fact lost the title of princess, being informed that she was to call herself lady. She was also to be made officially illegitimate. Mary was understandably shocked and wrote to her father. He didn't take it well. Mary was his daughter. She was expected to do as he said, as not only was he her father, he was God's anointed sovereign. Mary was punished and humiliated by having her royal household dismantled and being sent to join her half-sister's royal household at Hatfield. She was allowed to take 2 ladies, whereas the infant Elizabeth had a princess's household. It must have been truly awful for the 17-year-old Mary. She was separated from her mother and in fact had been ordered not to even write to her. She was alienated from her father. She'd lost her position and title. She'd lost servants she'd known for years. And she'd made an enemy of her stepmother by refusing to recognise Anne's status. In January 1534, Henry VIII decided to visit both of his daughters at Hatfield, with one of his aims being to persuade Mary to renounce her title of princess. However, a worried Anne Boleyn sent Thomas Cromwell after him to talk him out of seeing Mary. Instead, Cromwell would see the defiant young woman and try to talk sense into her. Mary continued her defiance, refusing to recognise her new title, and she was disappointed with her father not visiting her, so asked for permission to see him and kiss his hand. This was refused. However, as the king mounted his horse to leave, Mary went onto a terrace at the top of the house to see him. The king turned, saw her, and Mary knelt with her hands joined. Seeing this, the king bowed to her and put a hand to his hat. It was a small gesture, but it was something. She wouldn't see him again until the summer of 1536. Mary's separation from her mother and the breach in her relationship with her father severely impacted her health. She'd suffered from menstrual problems since she began her periods, but the headaches and cramps worsened with the stress that she was under. It's not surprising. And Mary saw what her father's great matter and his marriage to Anne Boleyn did to her country and her faith. People who'd been her father's trusted advisors went to the block. A young nun and a number of Carthusian monks were martyred. England broke with Rome. The country's religious houses were dissolved and their inhabitants left homeless. Men fighting for the Catholic faith were executed and women and children massacred. England went through so much because of Henry VIII's desire for a male heir, for his annulment of his first marriage. And Mary may well have thought that she played a part in that brutality with her defiance. Then, in January 1536, Mary lost her beloved mother. She must have been grief-stricken. But there was good news for Mary that year. Anne Boleyn fell from power and was executed on charges of high treason that May. A week after her stepmother's execution, Mary wrote to Thomas Cromwell, asking for him to intercede with the king on her behalf and asking for permission to write to her father herself. Mary was under the impression that Anne had been entirely responsible for her demotion and ill treatment, and that everything could now be undone and she could be reconciled with her father. She was wrong. Oh, so wrong. On the 15th of June 1536, the king sent members of his council, led by Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk, to visit Mary at Hunsdon. The aim of the visit was to persuade Mary into accepting her father as supreme head of the Church in England and to acknowledge that she was not the legitimate heir to the throne. It was not a cordial visit and actually amounted to bullying. Eustace Chapuis, the imperial ambassador and Mary's confidant, recorded how, after Mary had confounded the men by her very wise and prudent answers, one of the men told her, were she his or any other man's daughter, he would beat her to death or strike her head against the wall until he made it as soft as a boiled apple. In short, that she was a traitress and would be punished as such. This was a truly awful threat. Chapuis writes that it wasn't the only threat, and so worried was he for Mary's safety that he advised her to make all manner of sacrifices in order to save her own life. He advised her to submit to her father, the king, telling her that the emperor approved of this and that it wasn't only for her safety, but for the tranquility of this kingdom. He assured her that God looked more into the intentions than into the deeds of men. He managed to persuade Mary to sign the submission to her father without reading it, but this had a major impact on Mary's mental health, leading her to fall suddenly into a state of despondency and sorrow. She must have felt that she was going against everything that her mother had fought for. However, her actions led to a reconciliation with her father. His defiant daughter had finally obeyed, and all was well. Just a few days later, Mary was treated to a visit from her father and his new wife, Jane Seymour. And soon she was receiving gifts from the king and being set up in a new household. Just a few months later, she was being treated as the second lady in the kingdom, second only to Queen Jane. And of course, her half-sister Elizabeth had been demoted to lady and had been made illegitimate. Elizabeth was now below her. From summer 1536 to the king's death, Mary was in favour with her father. During that period, she either resided near court or lived at court, and had good relationships with Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr. The king lavished her with gifts, and in 1543 he had a new suite of riverfront apartments built for her at Whitehall so that she could reside properly at court, and so he could visit her easily. During Henry's last years, it was as if there'd never been anything wrong with their relationship. Perhaps it was easier to pretend there hadn't been a problem. Mary was good friends with Queen Catherine Parr, and she accompanied her father hunting and enjoyed court entertainment. She was once more his pearl, and these were happy years. When he'd made his daughters illegitimate, Henry VIII had removed them from the line of succession. However, before he died, he added them back in after their half-brother Edward. Unfortunately, in Edward VI's dying days in 1553, he wrote his device for the succession. In it, he went against his father's wishes, deeming his half-sisters illegitimate, half-blood, and incapable of inheriting the throne. Instead, this Protestant king chose the Protestant daughter of his cousin as his successor, Lady Jane Grey, a young woman who was also married to the son of his right-hand man, John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Mary had accepted her half-brother inheriting the throne when their father died. He was a legitimate male heir after all, so that was completely normal. But she was not going to stand for their first cousin once removed inheriting over her. She was Henry VIII's eldest child. She was next in line, and it was what her father had planned. Mary showed she was her father's daughter when she rallied support, proclaimed herself queen, and showed that she was prepared to fight for the throne. And I think she also showed that she was her mother's daughter in that she was prepared to die for what she felt was right. The succession crisis of 1553 was over in days, and Mary was proclaimed Queen of England. I'm not a psychologist, and it's impossible to analyse a 16th century person. But what Henry VIII put Mary through had to have had a huge impact on her. She was 11 when her father started the Great Matter. She was 15 when she was separated from her mother, and 17 when her status changed. The treatment she received took a toll on her health, both physical and mental, and her change in status and breach with her father must have affected her sense of self and belonging. Did her experiences make her more zealous in her faith because it was the one thing she could turn to? Probably. Did they make her a stronger person? Undoubtedly. But I'm not sure that we can say that the persecution of Protestants in her reign had anything to do with her father's ill treatment. They came from Mary's faith and her duty to her kingdom, which she had to protect from the evils of heresy. Mary went through a tough time in her half-brother's reign too, due to his religious legislation and her defiance of it. At one point, Mary even considered fleeing England for her safety, although courageously decided to stay. So that would have had an impact on her too. However, I think what Mary faced during adolescence shaped her far more than what she went through in her 30s. Mary faced profound psychological challenges during the late 1520s and 1530s. Her father's religious policies, his marital turmoil, his expectations of her, her mother's expectations of her. These surely shaped her worldviews and the woman she became. And I think she felt a real duty to protect the faith her father and brother had attacked. Did what happened to her shape the queen she became? Her view of marriage, her view on religion, her view on queenship? Of course, but it's hard to say just how much, isn't it? We're all shaped by the people that surround us, what we experience growing up, what we go through. And I think Mary became a force to be reckoned with, a tough cookie, and someone who, like her mother, was willing to become a martyr. What do you think, though? I'd love to know what impact you think the King's ill treatment had on Mary personally and as a monarch. Thank you for joining me. See you soon.